No one ever talked about her in a normal voice. In the halls of the mansion, her name was whispered, as if saying it too loudly might invite trouble. Staff straightened their backs when she entered a room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the billionaire himself, a man feared in boardrooms across the world, seemed to move more carefully when his fiancée was near. Everyone knew the rules when it came to her. Don't question, don't stare, and above all, don't cross her. The mansion itself felt different after her arrival. The air was heavier, quieter, like the walls were listening. Chandeliers sparkled, marble floors shone, but warmth was missing. Employees came and went quickly, heads lowered, hands busy, hearts tense. Rumors followed her footsteps. Stories of staff fired without warning, of icy looks that could freeze a room, of power used without a second thought. To the outside world, she was elegance and perfection. Inside the house, she was fear. The billionaire had chosen her for her strength, her sharp mind, her ability to stand beside him in a world that respected power above all else. Together, they were untouchable. Or at least, that's how it seemed. No one dared to challenge the balance they had created. No one except the new maid. She arrived quietly one morning, with a small bag and tired eyes that had seen too much of life already. She wasn't impressed by the size of the mansion or the expensive artwork lining the walls. To her, it was just another place to work, another chance to earn an honest living. She listened more than she spoke. She noticed things others ignored. The way fear lingered in the corners, the way smiles faded when a fiancé walked past, the way even kindness seemed rationed. The other staff tried to warn her. They told her to keep her distance, to stay invisible, to do her job and go home. This house isn't like others, one whispered, especially when she's around. The maid nodded, grateful for the advice, but something in her didn't quite agree. She had grown up learning that silence could be just as dangerous as speaking out, that sometimes doing nothing was worse than doing the wrong thing. The first time she saw the fiancé up close, it confirmed everything she had heard. The woman's presence was commanding, her eyes sharp, her voice calm but cutting. The room seemed to bend around her authority. The maid felt the fear too, but beneath it, she sensed something else, something hidden, something fragile. And then came the moment no one expected, a small, ordinary moment that could have passed unnoticed, a moment where everyone else looked away. Everyone else stayed silent. Everyone else followed the rules. But the new maid didn't. She did the one thing no one dared to do. And in that instant, the balance inside the billionaire's mansion began to crack, setting off a chain of events no one was prepared for. The room had gone still after that moment, the kind of silence that made people hold their breath without realizing it. The maid felt it too, the weight of many eyes on her back, the unspoken question hanging in the air. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't been rude. All she had done was speak, when everyone else chose not to. Yet in this house, that alone was enough to change everything. She returned to her duties, but the mansion no longer felt the same. Doors seemed to close more quietly. Footsteps followed her down long corridors. She noticed how often the fiancé's name came up in hushed conversations, always followed by nervous glances. The staff had learned to survive by staying invisible, and her small act of courage had made her stand out in a place where standing out was dangerous. Over the next few days, she began to understand why fear ruled the house. The fiancé controlled more than schedules and social events. She decided who stayed and who left, whose mistakes were forgiven and whose were remembered. People spoke of her sharp instincts, her influence in the billionaire's business world, her ability to smile while delivering consequences. Power followed her like a shadow, and everyone knew better than to step into it. The billionaire himself remained distant, absorbed in meetings and late-night calls. When he was home, he appeared calm, almost gentle, but there was tension in his eyes. He noticed everything, yet said very little. The maid wondered how much he truly saw, and how much he chose to ignore. It was hard to tell whether his silence was protection or avoidance. As the maid settled into her routine, she began to notice small cracks beneath the polished surface. The fiancé's perfection faltered when she thought no one was watching. A tight grip on a glass. A pause before speaking. Late nights spent alone in the study, lights burning long after the rest of the house slept. The maid didn't know what it meant, but she sensed there was more to the story than fear alone. One afternoon, she was assigned to clean a rarely used wing of the mansion. The rooms were filled with covered furniture and unopened windows, as if time had stopped there. In a quiet corner, she found something that didn't belong, an object out of place, carefully hidden but not forgotten. It raised questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. At the same time, the fiancé began to notice her, not with anger, not yet, but with interest. Their eyes met more often. Conversations paused when the maid entered a room. The atmosphere tightened, as if the house itself was waiting to see what would happen next. The other staff grew more anxious, warning her again to be careful, to stop drawing attention. But the maid couldn't ignore what she felt. There was a truth buried somewhere in that mansion, tangled in power, wealth, and fear. And, without meaning to, she had stepped directly into it. By the end of the week, a quiet request reached her ears, passed carefully from one nervous voice to another. A request that could change her place in the house forever. A request that involved the fiancé, the billionaire, and a secret no one was supposed to uncover. The maid stood alone in her small room that night, staring at the closed door, knowing one thing for certain. Whatever came next, there would be no turning back. The request came the next morning, delivered in the most ordinary way. A folded note placed beside her cleaning cart, written in careful handwriting, asking her to report to the east sitting room after dusk. No signature, no explanation. In this house, that alone was unsettling. The maid held the paper for a long moment, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. Everyone knew that room was rarely used, reserved for private conversations meant to stay private. As the day unfolded, she began to notice how differently people looked at her. Some avoided her completely, afraid that being near her might draw unwanted attention. Others watched with quiet hope, as if she had unknowingly become something more than a maid. She caught fragments of whispers, her name mixed with worry, curiosity, and disbelief. No one said it aloud, but they were all thinking the same thing. She had crossed an invisible line. From another corner of the mansion, the fiancé observed the same changes. She noticed a subtle shift in energy, the way tension moved through the house like a slow current. She had spent years mastering control, shaping her surroundings to her will. Yet this young woman, with no power and no intention of causing trouble, had disrupted that balance. It wasn't anger that filled her thoughts, but something closer to unease. The billionaire, meanwhile, sensed the shift without fully understanding it. His home had always been efficient, predictable. Now it felt unsettled. Reports reached him of mistakes made by distracted staff, of schedules slipping, of attention he couldn't quite name. He began to watch more closely, especially when the maid was nearby. There was something familiar in her quiet strength, something that reminded him of a time before power had complicated every decision. As evening approached, the maid prepared herself carefully. She didn't dress to impress or to hide. She wore the same simple uniform, her hair neatly tied back. Whatever awaited her, she wanted to meet it as herself. When the sun dipped low and the mansion grew quieter, she made her way to the east sitting room, each step echoing louder than the last. Inside, the room felt heavy with history. The curtains were drawn, the lamps dim. The fiancée stood by the window, her reflection faint in the glass. She didn't turn at first. The silence stretched, thick and deliberate. The maid waited, refusing to fill it with nervous words. "You're not afraid," the fiancé said finally, her voice calm but searching. The maid chose her answer carefully. "I am," she said softly. But fear doesn't always mean silence. That single sentence changed the air between them. The fiancé turned slowly, studying her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. There was a long pause, and in that pause lived years of guarded choices, unspoken regrets, and power built on distance. Elsewhere in the house, the billionaire stood alone in his study, unaware of the conversation unfolding. A file lay open on his desk, one he hadn't touched in years. A detail caught his eye, something he'd overlooked before, tied to a past decision that now felt unfinished. In the sitting room, the fiancée took a step closer. Her expression revealed nothing, but her hands trembled just enough to be noticed. "You don't know what you've walked into," she said. "Maybe not," the maid replied, "but I know this house is hiding something." The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Outside, night settled over the mansion, and with it came the sense that several truths were inching closer to the surface. None of them ready to be revealed, all of them waiting for the wrong or right moment to break free. The days that followed felt stretched thin, like the house itself was holding its breath. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. Meals were served on time. Rooms were cleaned. Meetings came and went. Yet beneath the calm routine, tension tightened with every passing hour. The maid noticed in the way doors closed a little harder, in the way conversations stopped when certain names were mentioned. Everyone sensed that something was coming, even if no one knew what it was. The fiancée became quieter, more watchful. She no longer ruled the house with sharp words or cold looks. Instead, she observed. She asked questions that seemed harmless but carried weight. She wanted to know where the maid had come from, how long she planned to stay, what she noticed while working. Each question felt like a test. The maid answered honestly, never more than necessary, trusting her instincts even when fear whispered otherwise. At night, the maid replayed the moments in her mind. The hidden object she had found, the late-night lights in the study, the file the billionaire now kept reopening, though she didn't yet know its contents. Pieces were moving, slowly aligning, but the picture remained incomplete. She felt caught between powerful forces, unsure whether she was a witness, a threat, or something else entirely. The billionaire, too, began to feel the pressure. He found himself questioning decisions he had made years ago, choices that once seemed practical but now felt unfinished. His fiancée sensed the distance growing between them, a subtle shift that unsettled her more than anger ever could. She had built her place beside him carefully, brick by brick. Now, one unexpected presence was loosening the foundation. Whispers spread among the staff that changes were coming. Some feared dismissals. Others hoped for freedom from the fear that had shaped their days. A few quietly placed their trust in the maid, though they never said it aloud. To them, she represented a risk worth taking, even if it cost them everything. One evening, an unplanned gathering was announced. A private dinner, just a few people invited. The maid's name was on the list. So was the fiancée's. And for the first time in weeks, the billionaire made it clear he would be present, no interruptions, no calls. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Everyone understood that this was no ordinary dinner. As preparations began, the maid felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She sensed that whatever truths had been circling the mansion were drawing closer, ready to collide. The fiancée watched her closely throughout the evening, her expression unreadable, as if deciding whether to protect a secret or expose it. In his study, the billionaire closed the file at last, his face pale with realization. A choice loomed before him, one that could alter every relationship in the house. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the dining room with purpose. The maid took her place at the edge of the room, heart steady but alert. The fiancée sat across from the billionaire, hands folded, eyes sharp. The air between them felt charged, fragile, like glass under pressure. As the first course was served, a single glance passed between the maid and the fiancée. In that look was a warning, a challenge, and something dangerously close to understanding. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, unheard by most inside the mansion. But the storm was coming, and when it finally broke, nothing inside those walls would remain the same. The thunder grew louder as the dinner continued, no longer distant but pressing closer, rattling the tall windows of the mansion. The sound unsettled everyone at the table, though no one spoke of it. The billionaire's eyes moved between his fiancée and the maid, as if weighing something heavy in his mind. The polite conversation felt forced, fragile, like a performance that could collapse at any moment. Halfway through the meal, a quiet interruption shifted everything. A senior staff member entered the room, pale and hesitant, holding a tablet. He whispered something into the billionaire's ear. The color drained from the man's face. He straightened slowly, his gaze hardening as he read what was on the screen. Whatever he was seeing, it wasn't meant to be public, and yet it involved everyone sitting there. The fiancée sensed it instantly. Her calm cracked, just for a second. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but urgent. The billionaire didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes moved to the maid. "Where did you say you found that item?" he asked quietly. The room froze. The maid felt every gaze turned toward her. She hadn't told him before, not directly, which meant someone else had spoken, or something she thought was hidden was no longer hidden at all. She chose her words carefully, aware that one mistake could cost her everything. "In the east wing," she replied, "behind a locked cabinet that hadn't been opened in years." The fiancée's hand tightened around her glass. The sound of crystal against metal rang sharper than the thunder outside. "You had no right," she said, her composure slipping. "That wing was sealed for a reason." "A reason I'm starting to understand," the billionaire replied, his tone colder than anyone had ever heard it. The air thickened with unspoken accusations. Staff near the walls shifted nervously, sensing they were witnessing something that could not be undone. The maid stood still, her heart racing, realizing that the small object she had found was far more important than she ever imagined. It wasn't just a secret, it was leverage. The billionaire rose from his chair. "There are things in this house that were buried long before you arrived," he said, looking at his fiancée. "And things that should have stayed buried." Her eyes flashed, not with anger, but with fear, real fear. For the first time, the power she carried seemed fragile. "You don't know the whole story," she said. "If this comes out, it won't just hurt me." Before he could respond, the lights flickered. The storm outside finally broke, rain pounding the roof as the room fell into uneasy darkness. A generator hummed to life, but the pause was enough to heighten the tension, to strip away any remaining comfort. In that brief moment, the maid noticed something no one else did. A look exchanged between the fiancé and the senior staff member. A silent understanding. A connection that raised more questions than answers. When the lights returned, the mood had shifted completely. Trust had cracked. Loyalties were uncertain. And whatever truth lay hidden in the mansion was no longer content to stay silent. The maid realized then that she wasn't just standing between a billionaire and his feared fiancé. She was standing at the center of a much larger conflict. One that could change the fate of everyone in that house before the storm outside finally passed. The storm raged outside as the billionaire finally spoke, his voice steady but heavy with truth. He placed the tablet on the table, turning it so everyone could see. Old documents filled the screen. Contracts, transfers, signatures that should never have existed. The sealed wing. The hidden item. It all traced back to the same source. His fiancée. Years ago, before their engagement, she had quietly taken control of part of his empire through legal loopholes and silent partnerships, using trusted staff to move information and bury evidence. It wasn't just ambition. It was protection. She had built a shield around herself long before anyone questioned her power. The house, the fear, the silence, it had all been carefully maintained. The room held its breath as the truth settled in. "You used this place to hide everything," the billionaire said, not angry, but wounded. "You turned my home into a vault." She stood slowly, her posture no longer sharp but tired. "I did what I had to," she replied. "In your world, weakness doesn't survive. I learned that early." The staff watched in disbelief as the woman they feared finally showed her cracks. The power she carried drained away, replaced by something human and fragile. The billionaire made his decision then. The engagement was over. Control would be taken back. The secrets would be handled quietly, without scandal, but the reign of fear in the mansion ended that night. The tension broke, but the room didn't feel lighter just yet. As people began to leave, the billionaire turned to the maid. "You changed this house," he said honestly, by refusing to look away. She nodded, relieved but uncertain, ready to return to her quiet role. But then the final twist revealed itself. The senior staff member stepped forward, his voice shaking. "There's something else," he admitted. "The item she found wasn't the only one." He revealed that the maid hadn't found the hidden object by chance. She had been placed there deliberately, recommended through a chain that traced back to an internal review the billionaire himself had ordered months ago, suspecting something was wrong but unable to prove it. The maid wasn't just new help. She was the final test. The billionaire looked at her, surprised. "You knew?" "I knew something felt wrong," she said softly. "I didn't know how big." The realization hit everyone at once. The maid hadn't been powerless at all. Her quiet courage had been guided by instinct, but her presence had been the missing piece the truth needed to surface. As dawn approached and the storm faded, the mansion felt different for the first time in years. Fear no longer ruled the halls. Silence no longer hid secrets. The fiancée left before sunrise, her chapter closed, but not without consequence. The maid stepped outside to breathe in the fresh air, believing it was finally over. She didn't see the billionaire watching from the window, thoughtful, because while one truth had been exposed, another question lingered quietly in the background, one that even she didn't know the answer to yet. Had she truly been placed there by chance, or had someone else, somewhere deeper in the shadows, planned this ending long before she ever walked through those doors? Morning light slowly filled the mansion, touching the walls that had held too many secrets for too long. The storm was gone, and with it, the heavy tension that once ruled every corner of the house. Staff moved differently now, not as quietly, not as afraid. Conversations returned in normal voices. Doors were left open instead of shut. It felt like a place waking up after a long, restless sleep. The billionaire stood in the garden, watching the sun rise as he hadn't done in years. Power had given him control over the world, but not over his own home. He finally understood that wealth could protect many things, but not truth. The engagement had ended without drama or headlines, handled privately and firmly. The fiancée left with her dignity intact, but her influence over the house was gone. Fear no longer followed her footsteps. Inside, the staff gathered quietly, unsure what the future would bring. The billionaire addressed him himself, something he had never done before. He spoke plainly without authority or threat. He acknowledged the silence they had lived with and the pressure they had carried. Change would take time, he said, but it would be real. No one would be punished for what had been done under fear. That promise alone lifted years of weight from their shoulders. The maid listened from the back, her hands folded, heart steady. She hadn't planned to become part of something so important. She had only followed her instincts, choosing honesty over comfort. When the billionaire found her later, he thanked her again, not as an employer, but as a person. He offered her a different role in the house, one with more responsibility and respect. She accepted, not because of the title, but because she believed this place could finally become something better. The senior staff member who had helped hide the secrets resigned quietly, choosing to leave rather than remain under a truth he could no longer avoid. Other small changes followed. Locked doors were opened. The sealed wing was cleared and restored. The hidden objects were removed, documented, and put to rest where they could no longer cause harm. Life in the mansion didn't transform overnight, but something important had shifted. Fear had been replaced with honesty, silence with understanding. The billionaire began spending more time at home, listening more than speaking, learning what his wealth had once blinded him to. For the first time, his power was guided by awareness, not control. As for the maid, she returned to her room that evening. The same room she had stood in days before, wondering if she would survive what came next. Now, she felt calm. She knew she had been part of something larger, not because she was chosen, but because she chose to act when it mattered. Before bed, she paused by the window and looked out at the quiet grounds. The mansion stood still, no longer threatening, no longer hiding. It felt human again. Sometimes, change doesn't come from strength or status. Sometimes, it begins with one person doing the one thing no one else dares to do, speaking up, looking closer, and refusing to look away. And in that billionaire's house, that simple courage changed everything.